Welcome to the debate here on the One More Stock channel. Today, we're diving deep into what I think is, well, the Silicon Civil War. It's this escalating battle between proprietary innovation and just pure established dominance.
Absolutely. We're really focused on that $50 billion chip war, and the central question today is, can Google's in-house custom silicon, their tensor processing unit, or TPU, can it actually challenge and maybe finally erode what everyone calls the impenetrable NVIDIA moat?
Exactly. And our whole discussion is anchored in the really comprehensive analysis from the Google versus NVIDIA Cornerstone article over on the One More Money blog. I'll be taking the affirmative side here, arguing that Google's vertical integration, especially with this massive leap from their new Ironwood architecture, poses a real structural threat to NVIDIA's pricing power. For this one, I'm the Google bull.
And I'm coming at this from a, let's say, fundamentally different strategic view. I'm taking the opposing side. I'll argue that NVIDIA's software ecosystem, their market position as the standard, it's still insurmountable. I am holding the line as the NVIDIA bull.
Look, a lot of people assume the AI chip war is basically settled. They think NVIDIA already won, that it's permanent. I'm here to argue that this assumption just fails to see the seismic shift that's happening right now. The whole focus is moving away from just raw compute quantity to superior unit economics and, pure operational efficiency. Google pioneered the transformer architecture, and they've been quietly building a fortress designed to do one thing: bypass the NVIDIA tax.
Okay, that narrative is compelling. I get it, but it ignores market gravity. NVIDIA is still the undisputed merchant silicon king. I mean, they command 80 to 90% of the market for AI training chips. So while Google's internal stuff is impressive, raw performance gains are, at the end of the day, secondary to the ecosystem. NVIDIA's real moat isn't the hardware. It's not the Blackwell chip. It's CUDA. It's that software environment that locks developers in. The switching cost is just too high.
I understand the gravity of CUDA. I really do. But you can't just dismiss the technological leap Google just made. I mean, Ironwood, the new TPU v7, it's not just some incremental update. This thing is a generational shockwave. We're talking 4 times the performance per chip compared to its predecessor, Trillium, and a staggering tenfold improvement over their V5P. But the real game changer here, the thing nobody is talking about enough, is the scaling, which is all enabled by their own proprietary innovation, the optical circuit switches, or OCS.
Okay, so what are the implications there? What does OCS actually do?
It completely changes the network topology. I mean, competitors are stuck with electrical cables, with standard switches. That creates latency. It limits distance. You're limited to maybe a couple hundred chips in a practical cluster. Ironwood uses light. It can connect, get this, 9,216 chips into a single pod. It's a massive AI hypercomputer, and it's all linked by this insane 9.6 terabit per second interconnect. They can run models across thousands of chips with almost no latency. Competitors just can't do that with off-the-shelf parts.
That scaling is definitely impressive for internal operations. I'll give you that. For running Gemini, sure. But you're focusing entirely on internal specs. Let's bring this back to the external market reality. NVIDIA's Blackwell is the industry standard. Developers have spent 15 years building on CUDA. That kind of institutional knowledge creates extremely high switching costs, and it translates directly to money. NVIDIA's data center revenue was what, $51.2 billion in a recent quarter? Up 66% year over year. And they sell these chips at gross margins over 70%. The market is not choosing hypothetical efficiency over guaranteed compatibility. Not yet.
That demand is a factor, I agree. But it's a short-term reality, not a long-term guarantee. Especially when you look at the core architectural difference. This is where the structural cost advantage is born. I like to use the chef versus assembly line analogy here, because it just makes it so clear. NVIDIA's GPU, that's the master chef. It's incredibly versatile, right? It can do graphics, AI, scientific modeling, but because it's a generalist, it suffers from the von Neumann bottleneck.
Okay, hang on. Can you just elaborate on that bottleneck for the audience?
Sure. The master chef, to make its fancy meal, has to constantly run back and forth to the memory, to the fridge, to grab data and put stuff back. All that running back and forth consumes a massive amount of energy and time and bandwidth.
And the TPU is different how?
Fundamentally, Google's TPU is an ASIC. It's the industrial assembly line. It is hardwired to do one task and one task only: matrix multiplication. Data flows through the chip in this perfect rhythm, like a heartbeat. It goes in, gets processed, and only comes out when it's totally done. By just stripping away all the general purpose stuff, Ironwood gets these huge gains, something like 2 to 4 times better efficiency per watt for the AI jobs it's designed for. The efficiency is literally baked into the silicon.
I agree that specialized efficiency is powerful, but that specialization is also its critical weakness. The versatility you're criticizing is what guarantees longevity in a field that changes, every 6 months. The risk with a fixed assembly line is huge. What if a new, disruptive AI algorithm is invented tomorrow? Something that doesn't fit the TPU's rigid design? Google is stuck. They have to wait years for a new chip.
They might be more adaptable, but they're wasting enormous amounts of energy to get that adaptation.
Exactly. But the ability to instantly run the world's biggest, newest, most experimental models, that outweighs the unit cost for most of the market. NVIDIA is always pushing the limits with chips like Blackwell, offering massive memory bandwidth, around 8 terabytes per second, which is a safety net for researchers. That's why it's the default choice for training the world's biggest models, where you just can't risk a proprietary architecture. And this brings us neatly to the clash in business strategies. Let's define them. NVIDIA is the merchant silicon king, the arms dealer. They sell their hardware, the H100s, the Blackwells, as a finished product at, these insane 73% gross margins. Their whole strategy depends on serving everyone.
And that 73% margin is the exact point of attack. Google is the integrated gold miner. They completely bypass that NVIDIA tax. For them, a chip is just a utility, an internal cost. They only pay for R&D and manufacturing. So if NVIDIA is making a 74% margin, Google is effectively saving that on every single Ironwood chip they deploy for Gemini, for Waymo, for search. It gives them a structural cost advantage their competitors, who are buying from NVIDIA, just can't replicate.
I'm just not convinced by the gravity of that internal saving, because it only applies internally. Or, when they're leasing the chips on Google Cloud, supporting the external market, the market that actually drives NVIDIA's revenue, is a totally different ballgame.
But that internal advantage becomes a huge external threat when the other hyperscalers start to substitute. Let's talk about the Meta factor. There are reports that Meta is exploring a multi-billion-dollar pivot to start including TPUs. And you've already got sophisticated players like Apple and Anthropic using TPUs for training. So if NVIDIA's biggest customers start shifting even a part of their workload to cheaper alternatives like Ironwood, that's going to directly threaten NVIDIA's ability to command those premium prices.
That is a compelling threat narrative, I'll admit. But Meta and the others face a massive sticky friction point, that CUDA lock-in. Google rents TPUs on the cloud. They don't sell chips. For Meta to pivot, they have to overcome this huge software barrier. Translating gigantic complex code bases from CUDA to JAX or XLA, Google software, is not a trivial task.
Why is it such a major undertaking? I mean, you're making it sound like it's impossible to port code.
It's way more than syntax. It's a whole paradigm shift. CUDA is often imperative. You tell the machine exactly what to do step by step. JAX and XLA are different. They're more functional. It requires teams to completely rethink how they program. That means retraining developers, hiring specialists, and accepting the risk that these less supported software layers might fail in production. For a Fortune 500 company, it's often just safer and easier to pay the NVIDIA tax.
That friction is getting smaller by the day as the software matures. And let's look at where the majority of future compute demand is actually going to be. I am strongly bullish on inference. The whole market is shifting away from just training, creating the brain, to inference, which is running the brain.
Okay, why is that shift to inference so strategically important in this debate?
Because inference is dominated by cost and energy efficiency, that's it. And that overwhelmingly favors the superior unit economics of a specialized chip like Ironwood. I mean, think about the scale. You train a model once, but you run billions of inferences every single day for search results, for recommendations, for user-facing AIs.
Google's internal CapEx efficiency is estimated to be 1.4 to 2.7 times higher than a GPU setup for these jobs. As AI gets integrated into everything, inference spending is going to dwarf training spend, and that means Google's cloud business margins are going to explode. The gold rush is shifting from selling shovels to actually mining the gold with the cheapest engine.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the training market is fading away. That's where the highest value and complexity is. Training is still the core high-value market, and NVIDIA completely controls it. It requires the most demanding, flexible, general-purpose tools, which is exactly NVIDIA's sweet spot. And while inference volume is growing, the strategic lock-in happens during training. If you build your model on NVIDIA using CUDA, you're very likely to deploy the inference workload on NVIDIA hardware too, just to keep things uniform and reduce risk. On top of that, the huge external user base, all the enterprises, startups, research labs, they still need the standardized NVIDIA platform. Vertical integration is a threat, yes, but the world builds on NVIDIA, and that ecosystem inertia provides a stability that a specialized internal utility just can't overcome yet. So as we wrap up, my view is this. The verdict for the foreseeable future is coexistence. NVIDIA remains the king of training and general-purpose AI. That's because of the software moat, the flexibility of their chips, and robust market demand, which is, constantly amplified by the Jevons paradox. NVIDIA will keep that high-margin general-purpose market.
And I'll reiterate that Google is building a highly efficient industrial engine. They have a structural cost advantage that competitors who rely on merchant silicon just can't match. This advantage positions Ironwood to become a dominant force in inference and in all the hyperscale workloads. We're seeing a fundamental split in strategy, and the key driver for the next, say, 12 to 36 months will be watching the ratio of training versus inference spending. That's the metric that will tell us who's really winning the battle for the cost curve.
Yeah, we certainly acknowledge the value of both approaches in shaping the future of AI. It's a defining technical and financial battle for the next decade.
This battle is just getting started. If you want to see the charts and the full breakdown of the Ironwood specs we talked about, you have to check out the One More Money blog.
And before we sign off, a quick reality check. Disclaimer, this conversation is for educational purposes only. We are not financial advisors, and this is not investment advice. Always do your own research.
Exactly. If you enjoyed this debate, smash that like button and make sure you subscribe to the One More Stock channel so you don't miss the next deep dive. We'll see you in the next one.